Hello, everybody, and welcome to Numi Talks. Today I'll be your host. My name's Mark Long. I have today with me Jason Knight. Jason, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here in this fine underground room.
This is a fine underground room.
Yeah, it's nice.
Go ahead and introduce yourself for the audience.
Right, so the thing is, though, like, we know each other already, right? But yeah, so as you already know, I'm Jason. I am a product management coach, consultant, fractional leader, advisor. I also do a lot of content work, basically on LinkedIn and newsletters and stuff like that, and also a podcast of my own called One Night in Product, where I talk to a bunch of people about product and related fields. So kind of, as I joked to someone a little while back, I kind of spend pretty much all of my time these days, it seems like it anyway, talking about product management or product management related stuff. So it's probably not the most exciting hobby that I could have taken up, but it's been pretty fun along the way as well. So.
It's a lot of stuff, which is why I wanted you to make the introduction. I don't know if I could have done it justice.
Well, look, I mean, when I do, I've kind of got a bit of a reputation for people that like my podcast, of kind of giving over the top intros, which I do very much to try and get people engaged. Like, some of these people have no idea who the hell I am. They're just these people that maybe they've written a book and they're kind of doing the rounds or something like that. And they'll be like, you'll see their face when they come on, like, just death stare. Like, they don't want to be there. They don't really know who I am or why they're there, apart from just that I'm just one of the 25 that they're doing that week for the book. And I find that if I do this kind of over the top intro that I try to do, and you try and get a few background facts and stuff, poke a little bit of gentle fun at them in the intro and stuff like that, and make a fuss of them, like, you can always see the point where they like kind of break, or they get a little bit interested or more kind of engaged. So, but it's also funny because that's not how I normally am. I don't speak on the podcast, or like now, I don't speak like this normally. I'm normally like, but you can just get used to putting it on. And people like sometimes have been like, oh yeah, you were really different after you start, like when you started recording, you were really different to like how you were before. I'm like, yeah, well, you have to. This part of the game, right?
This is your persona.
Put it on like a suit and then collapse sweating at the end of the night.
There you go. Let's start with fractional.
Yes.
Because fractional is all the rage at the moment, and you're one of the champions in the world of fractional.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
Is it just a trend?
Is it just a trend? I don't know. I'd like to think that companies are waking up to the benefits of it, and also the places where maybe it's not maybe as much of a benefit as it could be. But I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a trend. I think maybe from the supply side, like the number of people that are trying to do it, I think maybe it's become more trendy. And I think a lot of that could be down to layoffs. People getting laid off. They're like, oh, well, great. What now? Like, do I have to go and find another job with 150 people applying for every single position? Or should I try and sort of strike out on my own and go and do something different? And that's frankly kind of how I got into it as well. I'm like, yeah, I don't really like jobs anymore. I want to go and do some more stuff, but on a more flexible basis. But no one that's hiring you cares about your flexible basis, right? You've got to have something in it for them. And I think a lot of people are maybe going into this fractional thing thinking, hey, I want a bit more work-life balance, which I support. Or they think that maybe it's just a different way to go and earn some money. I don't 100% think that all of the people on this supply side, like the people that are doing it, are necessarily quite in tune with the actual reality of doing it. It's not just the same as it's like a part-time job. Like, or I mean, it technically is, but like, there's a lot. You're on a leadership level. You're going in. You're getting involved. I mean, I'm currently working with 2 companies at the same time, sort of splitting my time between the 2. You're holding 2 entire contexts in your mind at the same time, and 2 entire strategies, 2 entire sets of problems, staffing plans, all of those things, and it's hard work. It's hard work context switching. Product management is a really context switchy profession anyway, and to do that across multiple companies all at the same time, it's tough. But I do think from the demand side, like the people that are hiring fractionals, I think there's just becoming more awareness of the fact that maybe sometimes you don't need a full-time person. Maybe you do need someone that's just got experience across a number of different industries that can come in and steer, but you've still got like an operational team that can do the do on a day-to-day basis. Like, I think the biggest problem that you have from a demand side perspective, like the people that are hiring you, is that they just think that this is just an operational role, that you're just going to go in there and just be kind of just run things. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that people start to kind of doubt whether it's good, because you can't run things. You can't do a 5-day-a-week job in 2 days a week. But what you can do is you can steer, and I think a lot of people are starting to see the benefit of that.
I think there's so many layers in it that blows my mind. If I try to wrap my head around it, right? So some of the things you said, context switching.
Yes.
Like, what are the tricks? In fact, I heard you talk with Shivi on your pod the other day, and you talked about deep work. Is that one of the focus? Yeah, deep focus. Is that one of the tricks that you've got to help your brain to process? Monday is whatever day, and Tuesday is another customer day. Does it work like that?
Kind of. So when I started, and I've only been doing this fractional stuff for like a year and a half or so, so I'm kind of late to the game. But I think when I started, I was like, I'll just be available whenever. So my first contract, I'm like, I'll be available whenever. Like, let's just tell me when you want me in meetings, or tell me when there's things to do. I'll kind of shuffle stuff around the contract, and it'll all be fine. And it was fine, but it wasn't that fine, because you were context switching so many times during an individual day. So you're sitting there and you're doing some stuff, you go to some meetings, you try and do a bit of deep work after meetings, or synthesize some of the stuff that happened in the meeting. But then you've got some other stuff to do because you've got no sort of fixed schedule, and everything's being kind of moved around and kind of a bit more chaotic. So for me, when I renewed that contract, and certainly in the contracts that I've done since, it's always been very much, like you say, this is my day, this is my day, this is my other day, this is my other day. And you do your very best, apart from in exceptional circumstances, like, I don't know, there's an off-site or a leadership thing or some emergency happens or whatever, that you're there for those days, and you're present for them for the duration, but you're not when you're not. I mean, that's not quite fair. Like, I do kind of keep logged into Slack on my phone. Like, people can reach me outside of hours or outside of those days, but the expectation should never be that I'm like there for them immediately on those days, because if you're just context switching all the time, bouncing between meeting to meeting, it just reminds me of this story where some fractional CTO that I spoke to on some fractional community was like, he was in a meeting he was working for two companies at once on different days or whatever, and he was in a meeting for one of them, and he brought up a problem from the other company in the management meeting, which, I mean, I'm sure it was fine and he smoothed it over, but that's got to be pretty embarrassing, right? Talking about like a completely different set of problems just because you lost focus for a minute in a meeting, and all of a sudden you're talking about stuff that none of these people have any idea about. I desperately want to avoid that. I want people, when they do hire me, to be confident that I'm there for them and not thinking about something else at the same time.
So from what your experiences so far have taught you, is there a level where the application of hiring a fractional person in product management works versus where there isn't a level?
What do you mean by level?
Product manager versus head of product.
I think it's
versus
leadership.
C-suite. Is it only leadership that fractional is going to be successful?
I mean, I'm never going to say never, right? I'm very well aware of part-time product managers, for example, either job shares or just they just work for, say, 3 days a week. And I'm not going to say that it's not going to work. I don't think that's quite the same as fractional work, where I very much position that as this is something where you're going in to steer, and you need an it's very much not an operational role. Lots of clients will want you to be in an operational role. They'll want you to get involved in a bunch of stuff that maybe you shouldn't be. I also sometimes joke that sometimes they don't want you to be involved in stuff that you should be, because not everyone has a kind of a natural understanding of really where these people sit. And that's an education thing and maybe an experience thing, and it's going to probably get better as this becomes more embedded. But I think that overall I would say leadership level, getting involved in top level stuff, guiding strategy or team setup or organizational structure, hiring, making sure that the processes are set up in the right way so that you can then ultimately hand over to someone who can do it full time. Like, all of the places or the contracts that I've had so far have very much had an anticipated exit of either the person that's there already then takes over, or you're hiring someone new to take over. Like, there's got to be some kind of deliverable or exit. You can't just sit there and kind of bobble along for a bit and then just leave and everything's the same as it was before. Like, you need to that's a big part of it for me, is like setting the company up so that once you're gone, they're in a better place than they were when you started.
So what would be a measurable, clear outcome that you could set in your SLA or contract that would give them the confidence, I'm going to hire Jason and he's going to do these things, and you equally the confidence that I can be successful in this role? Because I feel like product leadership at a fractional perspective, that the difference between tactical and operational versus strategic is going to be really important. But then, how do you measure strategic? Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, and it's to some extent hard to measure the impact of product management, other than that the product itself is selling or good or growing or whatever, which in many companies has so many different elements and aspects to that as well. Like sales-led company, like the sales team can easily argue that they're the ones driving the sales, not the product team. It's obviously not that simple, but they could argue that, and many people would listen to them. I think when it comes to like how do you measure the benefit or the results of that fractional person coming in, again, you've got to line it up front. So like when you go in and you start a contract, it shouldn't just be this kind of ambiguous, I'm just going to come and sit around for a bit and sort of, talk to some people and do some jazz hands and then leave. Like, yeah, sure, I could do that. But for me, the goal is, well, what do you need? Do you need like a new strategy document, like pulled together, like a strategy, an evidence-based strategy, try and align the company around? Do you need to sort out the team coaching? Like, do you need to assess the team and work out what their weaknesses are and come up with a coaching plan and maybe even start to coach them? Do you need to kind of reconfigure ways of working and bring in new practices that maybe they don't have the expertise to do internally? Do you need to just come and hire some people or hire the replacement, like set the scene for that new person to come in and be successful? There are all these different things, and I think ultimately aligning them up front and having clear deliverables around this is a thing that I'm going to have achieved for you, a concrete thing. Now, obviously, for example, a strategy. You could sit there and say, well, it's all very well you coming in and writing a strategy for us, but you're going to be gone by the time we start implementing it. But then that's where it becomes more of a collaboration. And you say, okay, look, I'm going to work with you to deliver you a workable strategy that we all get behind. But this is your strategy. Like, I'm going to work with you to enable this to be made. But yeah, you're going to have to execute it. So you have to be on board with it. I don't want to just give you a document and then you're done and it just gets filed and then no one ever looks at it again. Yeah. That's not success. So like you have to really work on a collaborative basis with the rest of the leadership team, some of whom may not be that aware or kind of understand really why you're there. Like there's not always alignment on the leadership team. Like a CEO or COO or someone brings you in to solve a problem that they've seen in the company, but maybe the CFO or the CRO or someone else, they're not quite convinced or they don't really know what you're there for. So like there's a lot of hearts and minds stuff with the leadership team as well. But ultimately, aligning up front on what it is that you actually want to deliver, like what success looks like, and then putting that in your contract so that you're kind of held to it, and then deliver it.
Okay, cool. Good advice. How do you say no? Where have you seen a potential client, buyer, that was looking for your services and you just got alarm bells, warning signals everywhere?
Someone once said to me, and I won't name drop because I get in terrible trouble for that sort of thing, but one thing that they said to me was, well, there's two things actually they said to me, so I'm already correcting myself. The first thing was, when you start out, you kind of just have to accept anyone, which is kind of a bit of a depressing thing. But at the same time,
just get some business, any business.
But like if you don't have any track record in being a fractional person, like why would anyone hire you? Like they've got to take a punt. So if they're going to take a punt, and if you've got limited runway before you need to go and get another job again because you've not got any money coming in, then you do have to take you have to take a punt as well. That's not to say that any of the companies that I've worked for or with haven't been worth working for, but like it is a punt. You never know. When you get more established, you can start saying no. Now, at the moment, I'm saying no primarily because I'm just too busy. I've got too many things on and I can't take more work on. However, you've got to just kind of keep evaluating that and revisiting that and understanding like what your pipeline looks like. You need to have a pipeline or at least sort of warm discussions with people. I do a lot of content work, as you know, to try and kind of be around so people kind of remember me and know who I am. But when it comes to saying no, there's been very few that I've actually said no to because they've all had something interesting in them. A lot of it's been down to just because I couldn't do it. Some of it's been down to time zone. Like, it's just, it would be just too tricky to kind of West Coast of Canada or something like that. Like, yeah, cool, it'd be great to work with you, but like the time zones are just going to be tricky. Like one of us is either working early or late all the time. So what's the point? I'll recommend you to someone else. Every now and then it'll be something that's just kind of a little bit outside my capability. I mean, I use that word guardedly because I'm pretty capable. But like, someone came to me and they're like, "Oh, we need someone to come and do some like pricing research for us and to pricing exercise. Like, I know the fundamentals of pricing, but I'm not an expert in that by any means. Like, if you want someone to come in and deliver a pricing project, I'd far rather recommend you to a pricing person, because they're the one that are going to have done this like 19 times before. Like, a lot of the work that I do is more kind of company cultural, team culture, coaching and training up the team, building strategies and ways of working and stuff, which is very valuable for certain companies. But if you need someone to come and do like a pricing exercise or packaging exercise or something like that, like, yeah, I could give it a stab, but it's not my core competency.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing for me is, and this is another thing that, you know, is very common in product advice in general, is like, you want to niche down. It's really common when you start to go, let's just niche up. Let's just I'm a product guy. I can go and do anything. Anyone that comes to me, I can find a solution. And, you know, again, I'm pretty confident that I could do that if I had to. But if you narrow down a bit, then you start to be able to deliver actual value in a really key area to people, and that becomes a specialty, rather than just trying to be a generalist. And there's that old kind of cliche, like, if you're everything or you're something to everyone, then you're nothing. I don't even know how it goes, but you know what I mean. You need to be something to a few people, not nothing to lots of people.
A jack of all trades and a master of none.
I mean, there's that as well. And look, I'm a big fan of this kind of concept of generalists and the idea that, you know, T-shaped people, or just, I don't know, line-shaped people that are just kind of shallow at everything. I think there's lots of different ways to be successful, and all of these people can offer something to someone. But for me, it's like, and I think for a lot of people that I work with, like coaches and consultants that I know, you know, in the community that I've kind of, when I chat to, and you know, because there's a lot of people like me out there that are, you know, kind of a bit lonely on their own, trying to find other people like them that are doing this type of work. And you talk to these people, and a lot of them are all very much trying to focus down, trying to find what their kind of their edge is, and what their story is, why you should hire them unambiguously, rather than just that they're some random product person that could potentially do some product stuff.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've definitely bumped into quite a few people at various product events recently that are open for fractional work, networking to try and find those customers, to try and sign contracts with businesses. And frankly, they're not very good at it, because they're product people. They're not business development people. They're not commercially minded.
Yep.
And actually doing business development and winning business is a different skill set. What can you tell us about that? Because it's a job in itself, and the actual job that you're doing is not business development and winning new clients. So just like reveal what that's like in your world.
I think, and people, I'd say often, but that sounds like a brag, sometimes ask me, like, if I can give them any advice about how to get work like this. And I think for me, obviously I occupy a privileged position because I've spent a long time before this, but even before going consulting was like a twinkle in my eye, I was already building a podcast and doing talks and doing content and all this stuff. So like, I built a decent sized community off the back of that, even before I even decided to do any of this stuff. Now, I naively thought, oh, hey, yeah, that's going to be really, you know, click my fingers and it's going to be fine. Like, all these people going to be rushing in trying to hire me. That didn't really happen. And I think one of the things that I've really reflected on with others as well is this idea of like, yeah, a lot of these people are people that want to work with me or for me, not hire me. And that's not to diminish any of them, but it's just the target audience is a bit different for the type of services. You know, if I was selling something that was kind of more mass, you know, for ICs and stuff, like, you know, selling a course, or, you know, selling some kind of, you know, service that they could just buy themselves or something, it'd be much easier to, you know, monetize that audience. But I don't want to monetize the audience, not directly anyway. I don't like charging people for things, which is obviously a bad thing from a sales perspective. But, you know, I like charging companies. I don't like charging people.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm not going to say that having that network wasn't a benefit. I'm very sure that it was, because there's kind of some level of name recognition, and also just the, you know, the kind of the network and the recommendations that you can get, and people kind of just bring you up in conversation and stuff like that. I'd say that the vast majority of my prospecting, if you want to call it that, has actually been, again, without wishing to sound like, you know, too up myself, it's been inbound. Like, people have come to me. I've not like had to do advertising, you know, do the occasional LinkedIn post saying, hey, hire me, but that never works as far as I can tell. Like, the engagement on those types of posts is always very small. And I see that with other people as well. Like, you see other people like banging on all the time about hiring them, and, you know, get me as a coach, or get me as a thing, or get me as a that. And like, there's very little engagement on those types of posts, even for people with quite large following. So I'm assuming there's some kind of algorithmic thing going on there. LinkedIn's kind of deprioritizing stuff, whatever. I've found a lot of the best kind of lead gen that I've done is just networking, glad handing people, going to events, just trying to basically be in people's lives.
Yeah.
And, the social stuff is part of that. But for me, a lot of it's just good old fashioned going to places, talking to people, shaking their hands and, having a drink with them or whatever. And I almost put it in this kind of, I think I did this on the episode that you talked about with Lloyd about community-led growth on the podcast, is like talking about sort of engineered serendipity. This idea that if you put yourself in enough places, then occasionally that's going to pay off. Not all the time. Like, you're not going to sit there and always get work off of these people. But maybe again, this is a personality thing. I don't want to get work off of people. I want them to want to work with me, and I want them to give me money if they want me to do that. But I don't like being too aggressive. I see people that are just, monetizing everything instantly, or trying to at least. And, they can do whatever they want to do. But I do community stuff. I, set meetups up. I've got like online networking and stuff like that. And I don't want to monetize any of that. I don't really monetize the podcast. I've been going for 3 years, and I've probably, done a readout on about 9 episodes or something like that, because I don't want it to just be about money. I don't want people to doubt my motives. I want to have good conversations with people, and if work comes off the back of that, then brilliant, I'll do the work. But I don't want to be like, the kind of buy. Maybe that's naive, and maybe at some point that's going to come back and bite me. But it's worked okay so far.
From where I'm sat, it looks incredible.
Well, yeah,
and I know that
external perspective though, like I've got to show the.
You've done a good job. You've done a good job with that. I mean, you did a good job with the name. I mean, I love it. One night in the pub.
Well, one night at the pub, one night networking. It's good having a good surname that you can use for these sorts of things, right?
Yeah, it is good. A lot of people would love to be able to do that, and they literally don't know where to start. They don't know how to start. I mean, I'm now currently Numi Talks and NumiCon. We've been doing events. I've been standing on a stage. I shit myself. Absolutely shit myself. Yeah. It took me a long time to pluck up the courage. And I'm a sales guy. And my job is like this. And even I found it so hard, right? Yeah. We're talking about a category of person that's a product person, that isn't a commercial salesperson, that's got no idea how to build a community or a podcast or whatever. And here's you saying, but if you actually do all of those things and you want this flexibility in your life and be a fractional person, you are going to get inbound traffic. You're going to win hearts and minds. People are going to start to associate okay, you're there all the time. All right, now let's talk. What advice would you give to somebody? Like, how do they start this?
So, as hard as it may be to believe, I'm very much an introvert. I, until relatively recently, was very bad at looking people in the eye even. I had to teach myself to look people in the eye.
Did you?
100%. And that's going to sound stupid, but I did. And I started out as an engineer back in the day. Like, my career started developing stuff. I mean, technically it started making telesales calls, but after that, it started as a developer for years. And I was very much the kind of the guy in the corner with the headphones in, staring into his monitor, desperate not to be bothered by anyone for quite a while. And that came a little bit less as I kind of went through the career and started having to manage people and getting into more leadership positions and stuff. But I think when it came to actually putting myself out there and doing some of the things that we've just talked about, that did not come naturally to me at all. And a lot of it, I would say, and I think we talked about this before we started, is almost like a persona you put on. As I say, I don't talk like I do like now on my podcast, like all the time. I'm very monotonous and boring and dull, and and I are, and I just like, I'm not always good company. And most people that know me will say that at some point I'm probably not been good company. But I think it's a classic introvert thing where you can do it for a bit and it tires you out and then you don't want to do it for a bit more. And I know people that have gone and done good talks on big stages. They've had to kind of go for a little lay down for a bit and then come back to the event afterwards or something once they've kind of recharged their batteries, like their social batteries. I don't think I'm quite to that level, but at the same time, I do find it very tiring to kind of be on. And these days, especially having done nearly 200 episodes of the podcast and having to kind of be on it for all of those, like days or weeks worth of listening, like end to end, is like you get really used to listening to yourself and editing yourself as you talk to make sure that what comes out is somewhat, coherent and that you're making sense and that you're not umming and ahhing, and but that comes at a mental cost because you're having to concentrate really hard. So I think I would advise. I mean, what I did when I started out, I just started out. Like, it's funny. I remember back in 2002, not 2002, 2002. We started a band like in my sort of mid-20s with a friend of mine, and there's probably about 20 of us all basically in the band at the beginning because we didn't really know who was going to be doing what. And again, at that point, I was very much an introvert. I didn't want to go on stage or do any of this stuff, but it was just kind of a cool thing to do. You kind of hang out with your friends, play a bit of music, and then all of a sudden we got offered a gig. 2 weeks' notice, and we barely played together as a band. And we sat there and as a group of us, and the group kind of whittled away as various people didn't really want to do this sort of thing. And there was basically a band left of us, like 5 of us. And it was like, let's just do it. Let's just get out there and do it and see how it goes. And if it goes well, brilliant. If it doesn't go well, I guess that'll suck then. But you kind of just get through it. Got up on stage basically for the first time in my life, playing guitar, which I wasn't that good at, still not that good at. But we just did it. And it was kind of my first experience of just doing it. And I think it was the same with the podcast in a sense. I remember I studied Spanish at Open University for a while, and it was all distance learning, Open University distance learning. A lot of my, assessments were, you had to record them and send them in. And I'd listen to myself back and, I'd hate my voice. I hated it. I hated my voice.
Everybody does that. I can't stand watching myself. My wife does it. I don't want to watch myself back.
Well, and watching myself's even worse. I mean, I'm most certainly not going to watch this. I've made peace with my voice, but I've still not made peace with my face and body. But the thing for me was like, I just wanted to do it. So and there also weren't that many podcasts around at the time. So I thought, well, this is a nice little niche. Tried a bit of blogging and stuff that hadn't really gone anywhere. So I was like, let's just try it, see what happens. And that was kind of, I guess, in many ways, although I can't necessarily attribute like so much like maybe direct work to the podcast, doing the podcast has made me such a more effective speaker and communicator and gotten rid of all the ums and ahs, and it's given me like the ability to just talk about stuff that I maybe didn't have before. And you can sit there and say, well, what's your advice? Go and start a podcast. I mean, please don't. There's a lot of them. I mean, this is obviously basically kind of one as well. But don't get me wrong, I'm all for podcasts, but there are quite a lot of them these days. So don't go and start a podcast. But anything that you can do to just practice the craft. And going back to that kind of band story from the beginning, just get out there and see what happens. We talk a lot in product management about, fast learning cycles and iteration and, being agile and iterative and all of that. You can iterate this stuff as well. Like, it's fairly low stakes if you're going to go out and start trying to either go and do something on stage or, go to an event and try and talk to people. And I know it sucks, and it sucks for me. I still to this day struggle to kind of make small talk with people unless I really try. But just try and see what happens.
I mean, there's so many people. There's so many people that really sweat the small stuff, especially when it comes to just basic things like when I think of social media and LinkedIn. Like writing a post and posting it on LinkedIn can take them hours because they're so worried about people reading it in the wrong way. Yeah. And I'm like, just get on with it. Just start somewhere.
Everyone else cares more than you do. No one else cares more than you do. If everyone else cared more than you do, that would be a horrifying situation. But like, no one else cares more than you do. So it's really, and I have this even to this day with the podcast. Like, I edit my own podcast still because I'm very anal and I want to make sure that it's all right. And I'm sitting there like umming and ahhing about whether I should remove this stumble or that stutter or that noise or whatever. And I know for a fact, like when I listen to other people's podcasts, that I don't care about any of that stuff. I've listened to podcasts for, different all over the place that have the terrible audio quality and bad editing and all of that stuff. And they're all fine because they're interesting. But I'm sitting there agonising over this bit of noise that I can't get to go away because, they dropped a pen or something like that. And like you start to realise that sometimes, some things don't matter.
They don't. Well, if we talk about your journey, because I'm conscious that we're limited on time as well today, but I did want to dig into something that I don't know how you manage to trump me every time. It's like I make a few shows like this, you make 200. I worked at a company for 15 years. You worked at a company for 19 years.
Yes.
I mean, it's still painful when I think back now about leaving that company. It was a real wrench. Yours, was it the same when you left GFK, or was it like a long, like slow, torturous death before you left?
I often say, or not often, sometimes say, that I should have left GFK probably half a decade to 10 years before, really. Like, I'm quite old now. I've kind of got into this, almost like second career in a way, although a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in my second career is very much stuff that I was doing in the first half of the career. So it's not like I've just like made it up. But like, you're right. I spent a long time at GFK, and I'd say that probably the first bit and the last bit were the bits that kind of set the stage. Well, first bit and like maybe the last third or something like that were the bits kind of set the stage for everything that's come since. There were a lot of what I might somewhat call wasted years, which is probably insulting to anyone that ever watches this that was working with me at that point. Not wasted because I wasn't doing good work or working with good people, because I was just kind of doing the same stuff for a few years in the middle and not really developing, and
not learning.
And I kind of just got, that was just me. I was very much in the kind of the gold watch crowd at that point. I'll work there for a while and then it'd be fine. But then they got bought out by KKR, so a huge private equity firm, who then wanted to go through this whole big transformation of the company, and they sold off like half of it to all of the kind of the legacy stuff. Wanted to transform it into a digital kind of data analysis hub, whatever, for certain types of research. And they brought a lot of new people in. They brought in like all these cool new kind of like tech CTOs and tech engineering leads and tech product people and stuff like that, and started doing all these different things that I'd never really seen before. I've been building products for years before that, but like this was the first time. This is a 10, 12,000 people company at the time, 100-year-old German firm with offices in every country around the world pretty much, and very much a service mindset. Mm-hmm. So like we'd done lots of things over those years, but it wasn't really the same as what you'd imagine, say, for example, at a startup. Now all of a sudden they're bringing all these tech people in, and you start getting all these new ideas, and you start to realize that maybe this isn't the place to do these things. So that's when you start getting this thing in your head, well, maybe I should, I know it's going to be hard to leave. Like my leaving do there was, we filled an entire pub because I'd been there for so long. Even if people didn't like me, they still felt they had to come, right? So it was just like, it was a really good leaving do. Like my leaving card and gifts and all that. It was kind of emotional because I'd just been there for so long. Yeah. But I absolutely knew it was the right move because I got to a point. I don't necessarily think it was like a slow, horrible, painful goodbye, but it was definitely, it wasn't as good as it had been. There were definitely more opportunities elsewhere, and I just kind of got this almost like a second wind when you start to realise, maybe rekindle a few things and maybe get out of that kind of idea that you're just going to be here forever and that there's actually new things to discover out there. So, it was kind of a mixture of like really exciting and getting into a new world, and slightly tinged with regret. But to be honest, I'd say I'd never look back. But they actually invited me to they got me to talk at a conference in Athens last year. Like they do a global tech conference every year. They got me to come back over and do a presentation on product management, which I thought was an interesting kind of circling back in many ways. Yeah, it's kind of like going home. Like there were so many people there that I still remembered fondly that had kind of fallen out of touch with. So it was really kind of good that those two worlds came together again. But like on a professional level, absolutely. Like it's been, there's always challenges and interesting things wherever you go, but it's definitely been, it was the right move. Yeah, that's good. And I love the circle of life closure, like Hakuna Matata. Yeah. Wow. Well, if this has taught me anything, just reinforce that you're never too old to achieve your dreams. Like Colonel Sanders, what was he? Like 65? 175 by the time. A million years old. But I mean, a story of two careers in a sense. Mm-hmm. 20 years worth of employment, and now you're into this phase in your life where you're alive, full of energy. There's no energy. It's all just... Man, there is. I see you at events and you dominate the room. And considering you're an introvert, this is not bad, right? So if you can do it, anybody can do it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm nothing special. And this is one of the things that and I don't even say that in a kind of painful, self-deprecating way. Like, I mean, most people aren't anything really that special. Spoiler alert. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, everyone's got a certain set of capabilities and certain things that they can do and things that they can't do, and people can make the best of what they whatever talents that they have. But yeah, I would absolutely say, like, I don't ever want, not that anyone does, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm doing anything special. All I'm doing is, doing things as they come up, trying to do them the best that I can, taking learnings from doing them, learnings from people that I talk to, and trying to turn those into knowledge that helps me do the next thing. I'm very inquisitive. Part of the reason for the podcast, I want to talk to people. I want to find out what they've got to say. I don't want to talk about, I'm doing it now, but I don't want to talk about what I've got to say as much as I want to, I want them to tell me their stories, and I want to learn from other experiences. I don't want it just to be like me jerking myself off to how clever I am. That's never been, that's not, anyone that's doing that is doing it for the wrong reasons. Whereas I don't want to be like, painfully humble or anything like that, because, that's somewhat self-serving in a way. But yeah, just being inquisitive and realizing that you've always got room to improve, I think it's important.
Good. Great stories. Great learnings. You're never too old.
Well, I'm starting to feel a bit too old, but, it'll be fine.
You can be old and grumpy a little bit. Thank you, Jason. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of Numi Talks. Thank you so much.